I do have another message from the Arcturians today for you guys, and I do have my handy notes here so I don't forget anything, leave anything out. Now, this one is really important in terms of getting it out into the collective consciousness through spoken word. This is something we need to speak about, speak it into existence, truth into existence, okay? To break apart and diffuse fear is how it's coming through. Diffuse fear. All right, and disseminate knowledge. Thank you. So these are the Arcturians. Okay, there is a fear, speaking of fear, okay, you guys, which stems from the religious structure that understanding beyond a religious paradigm will somehow separate people from God. So many of you know where this is going now, okay? Now, a lot of you who pass through here will already be aware of this, but many of you either won't be really aware of what's about to be said here, or you won't be aware that there's a sticking point in your, let's call it subconscious, but it's really just your consciousness. Okay, so we're merging all of that where the subconscious and unconscious becomes conscious so that we are aware and able to bridge everything into one whole being. This is important so that wounds do not stay hidden. Okay, that's coming from the Arcturians now. So that wounds are not allowed to sit, all right? To sit. And there's a word that they're trying to give me, you guys, but they're not giving me a word. They're showing it to me. You know, sometimes that happens. It's where something becomes stagnant and it sits and maybe it starts to decay, but that's not the word that they're using. But it's got to do with water and stagnancy. So that's for some, this is going to activate some knowledge for some of you guys, this specific description. Okay. I wish I could think of the word that correlates to what they're showing me. Okay. All right. So yeah, so I want to read that again. There is a fear which stems from the religious structure that understanding beyond a religious paradigm will separate people from God. That's what we're talking about today. However, a true cycle of evolution and energetic expansion, I want to read that again, because this is what we're going to address here. A true cycle of evolution and energetic expansion. That's what we're in now. And what they're referring to is in an unmanipulated setting. They're talking about if this is going to be a true cycle and the setting is unmanipulated. So this setting has been somewhat manipulated. Okay, try not to let fear seep in to this conversation. You know, that's a very fear-provoking statement there. But yeah, this has been heavily manipulated, but it's okay. We're coming through that, and we will continue to come through that manipulation. That is consequently also part of the creation and part of an evolutionary journey of a species as well. This can occur. It is to a high degree in your society, civilization, on your planet, within and amongst your people, heavily infiltrated by foreign motives, if you will. These are the Arcturians, okay? So we have been heavily manipulated now, okay? They're making no mistake to say that. But everything serves a purpose. We will start to talk more about what actually creates reality. And this is so important so that we understand that no matter what has been created, we can create more further and beyond and through this. Okay, we can create a healed version of this. We can create whatever we want, ultimately. The collective consciousness has chosen to come through the heart frequency in order to expand and come closer to source, to the creator, okay? To God's source. That's what we're talking about here. That's the direction, and that's what we're choosing. Okay, so we're going to get back to this, what we're talking about in terms of religion, though. That was a little bit of a tangent, okay? But it was definitely an activation for someone into memory, higher, more expanded memory of what has occurred in the past. Okay, in past iterations of evolution of humans, specifically, okay, or humanoids, specifically. All right, so the Arcturians are saying, however, a true cycle of evolution and energetic expansion in an unmanipulated setting presents much differently than that previous statement, okay? It presents much differently than, the fear that stems from the religious structure. Now, notice they're saying structure, religious structure specifically, not everyone involved in religion or everyone religious. That's not what's being said here. Many of us come from religious backgrounds. And many of us will still practice things that we've learned from those religious backgrounds because they are beautiful and pure and heart-centered. So this isn't an attack on religious people, nothing like that. They're talking specifically about the structure, okay? Really the dogmatic structure. But we may get more into that. We'll see what comes through. So the true cycle presents much differently. And so this is what the Arcturians are going to talk about. They're sort of describing what this true cycle looks like or might look like for you in an unmanipulated setting and just very general, okay? It starts with basic needs. As you come into consciousness, full sentience, you are somewhat aware of an outer you, a source, for instance, but it's some would think of this as, perhaps 2D, okay? 2D, 3D, something like that. But they're not really making those references in terms of the dimensional references. They're just speaking very basic because everybody doesn't necessarily have to use that terminology. Okay, so from a broad standpoint, basic needs are being met in the beginning, okay? Then what comes from that, what progresses from that is becoming curious about an origin. Now they're moving through a cycle again, okay? This is just moving very generally through a cycle. There's a curiosity that develops through the generations about where did I come from, an origin, a creator. And from that, it comes into sort of a needing outside validation standpoint. So that's where worship comes in, developing rules to govern behavior, understanding more about or feeling more into the beginning of a heart consciousness, the beginning of recognizing the other as self, okay, but needing a governance, an outside governance. So there's the worship, okay? Now, moving through that, there is a higher frequency understanding of science. Now, we're going to stop there for a second. Now, this keeps moving, but we're going to stop there for a reason. Now, within that part of the evolution, and this is very broad. This isn't even just about humans, by the way. They're speaking very generally. Any sentient species, okay, or any being that's sentient, this is evolution. This isn't just for humans, okay? And that's why another reason why it's so broad. We are certainly not the only planet to have gone through this process, of course, okay? So right there with the worship and the needing outside validation, that comes about through advancement, okay? That is going to come alongside that. And with this advancement, science is in there. There's also the development of menial technologies, okay? Low-level technologies. Low-level industrialization. Sometimes it can be at a very high level, but it's devoid of heart consciousness still. So it's only going to go so far, if that makes sense, okay? Due to the consciousness understanding its own subconscious link to a creator, okay? Because there's still higher aspects. There's still a connection to the creator, whether the species is aware of it or not. Okay, I hope that's not too wordy. I hope I'm making sense. I don't want to get off on too many tangents, okay? But again, with the worship comes a little bit of science and advancement alongside it. So then after that, you're morphing into a higher frequency understanding of that science. All right? So we're in a lot of that. That's what's happening now or attempting to happen, but that's also where the manipulation has attempted to happen. Okay, because that's where a species would be stopped. That's where the development would stop, the higher level development. If something wanted to keep something else enslaved, it would cut it off before it could get to the higher frequency advancement, okay? So there's a higher frequency understanding of science, meaning the physical laws and conditions for creative energy and for the physical existence, the physical experience, the planetary structure. There's a higher level understanding of that. Okay, so I want to read what they've got here. So they would understand creative energy more clearly, the tools and devices now tangibly interpreted as God creator aspect, or the origin, or you could say source. So through the science, the understanding of what that creator that they have been worshiping, there's an understanding of what that creator is actually made of. What actually, how can you define it? So now tools are able to define and interpret that energy. And through that, there's the understanding of self. So yes, they say through each phase or cycle, emotional attachment to specific physical conditions begin to wane. They decrease significantly. Again, I want to read that again. The emotional attachment to a specific physical condition begins to decrease. The emotions begin to balance, you guys. You can see more clearly if you understand, and you guys are definitely, many of you are masters already at this. And some of you coming in, many of you coming in are becoming masters at understanding innately, intuitively, frequency, vibration, and how that connects to or correlates to emotions. Okay, so remember at the beginning of this, we talked about fear. This is a big one. Now, this is exactly the fight that's going on, or the war that's being waged on the planet. If you want to think of it, these are heavy words, right? The word war holds a certain frequency. It's very heavy, weighty. If we have it connected to our body in a particular way, to other particular emotional experiences in our body, then we can create that experience, the old experience of war. Okay? So just take note of that. Sit with that for a minute, because the opposite is also true. You can also train the reaction out of your body when that word is heard or spoken. All right, that takes a lot of, the word training, a lot of patience, okay? And for many of us, a lot of time, a lot of love, unconditional love for self to work through these emotional reactions in our bodies. All right, so here's what the Arcturians are saying. Coming full circle, meaning going through this entire cycle, does not mean becoming godless, okay, which is a lot of the usurping that's going on right now. The fear, right? Oh, you're going to become godless. You know, you're going to be dark automatically, which there is a lot of balancing of dark and light happening, and it is very confused, largely based on the insertion of fear, confusing people, right? Balancing of the dark and the light within self does not mean operating from, you know, a very far side. And we always use that pendulum reference, right? It does not mean operating from the opposite side of the pendulum and moving through that. You're always moving through heart frequency, which means you're always connecting to the creator and the whole. So you're not going to behave in that way towards another if you are operating on behalf of the whole. Okay? That's incongruent. It's incongruent, but you will understand both and bring them to balance. So when you need to use certain tools, you do have them, but they're moving through a heart consciousness. It's different than what many people yet think, but they're moving into that. They're figuring it out, okay? So everybody be patient. It's getting figured out. People are moving through their wounds. They're moving through and healing, bringing things to balance within themselves first. So there are some more steps happening. But yeah, coming full circle, to get back to the message, does not mean becoming godless or less spiritual. On the contrary, coming full circle means realizing that everything, especially science, is indeed spiritual. And therefore, everything is creator energy and ultimately God. Isn't that beautiful? And a lot of you, so a lot of you know this, and it is being, the memory is being reactivated within you consciously, and some of you in your body, because the confusion can weigh you down. And when you're in a situation, actively in a situation in real time, this is easy to forget. But this is indeed what's happening, okay? We are coming back actually into full embracing of what source energy, creator energy actually is, and operating through what we're going to call Christ consciousness, okay? Because that phrase holds a certain vibration on the planet right now and is needed because of that vibration, because of what Jesus taught on the planet. The original, the actual intention of his teachings is what we're moving through right now. But if you don't think of it that way, and your reference isn't Jesus or Christ consciousness, that doesn't make you wrong. This is a frequency. You definitely do not have to use that phrase. And that's not what was intended with his teachings either, right? So very interesting. Yeah, whatever correlates to that is definitely all that matters. So I'm just going to continue here. We're almost done, okay, guys? I didn't want to make this too long. But many things in religious texts are going to inherently contradict this because those prophets, philosophers, and scribes were influenced by the social ramifications of their time period. So not because they were necessarily evil or bad or even wrong. They're just saying it's within the culture. It's a sign of the times, so to speak, okay? It's relative to the times is a better way to say that. And so they're saying, however, there are examples, notably Jesus and Buddha. There are more, you guys, but they're saying notably Jesus and Buddha, who taught clear truth, intentionally connecting the science of the universe and universal law with spirit and God while using terminology that could be understood within those predominant social structures. Okay, so that's the message, you guys, all right? A little bit of a weighty one, a little bit of a heavy one, but needed. Even if you already know these things, this is needed to speak. We need to speak these truths. All right, into the collective consciousness once again, and into the body, into the physical body. Let the body remember the true nature of, in this case, humanity, but this applies to any evolving civilization, okay? Everything can be bridged, brought to balance. This is part of the cycle, and we are moving through it. All right, I love you guys so much, and I will talk to you again very, very soon. Namaste.